Spitfire Mark Vs were lost at an alarming rate even before it was established that Germany had introduced a superior fighter. The answer was yet another Spitfire, the Mark IX. Hastily putting a new 1,660 horsepower Merlin 61 engine into a Mark V airframe, Supermarine created what was supposed to be an interim aircraft.
When we got the nines with this booster on, supercharge, extra super, I mean, all of them had superchargers. There's an extra booster, but you could only bring it in at altitude. That was wonderful because you could see a 109, say, a mile away, and you knew if he didn't see you, you could catch him up. That was really satisfying. It's a wonderful feeling. I'm gaining, I'm gaining, I'm gaining. Of course, when you get to that stage, now the learning curve, you've completed it, and you're feeling confident, you're aware what's going on. That's when the trouble starts. That's when you start getting hit again.
The Mark IX's first major operation was in support of the raid on Dieppe on August the 19th, 1942. And it was a fierce baptism of fire. 600 RAF fighters engaged hordes of FW-190s and ME-109Gs in a battle the like of which had not been seen since the summer of 1940. The Mark IX stayed in service with the RAF until after the end of the war, a remarkable feat for a stopgap aircraft. By the end of 1942, it was obvious to the designers at Supermarine that the Merlin engine had come to the end of its development. For some years, they had been experimenting with a new Rolls-Royce engine, the Griffon, which had been developed directly from the old R-series engines of the Schneider Trophy aircraft. Joe Smith's team began redesigning the nose of the Spitfire to accommodate the bigger engine. The definitive Griffon engine fighter was the Mark XIV, a real beast of an aircraft with a stunning performance. A top speed in level flight of 439 miles an hour and a diving speed of around 500 put it at the very limit of piston engine flight possibilities.
The 14 was an extraordinary airplane. It was really so powerful. It made such a noise, even in the cockpit. It was like flying a motorbike. That was my feeling about it. You were certainly one with the airplane, and when you pushed the foot, really, you were moved. It was great. But it had this even worse problems with the effect on the controls. In fact, just for amusement, you had to be careful when taking off that it didn't swing, you see. So for amusement, I thought I'd work out how you could get off as quick as possible. So what I did was to, I can't remember which foot it was, supposing it was the left foot, I turned into the upwind and I put my left foot full right round like that. Then I'd open the throttle until it began to move, and then I'd keep it there, and as the speed increased, so I could get the throttle forward. So by having my foot already fully in the rudder, I was having maximum energy to get off the ground. And also, when I did that, and I opened it quickly, the wing would drop, because the wheels are fairly close together, and there was such torque, it was enough to turn the aeroplane in the opposite direction. So it was, for the size of aeroplane, it was a very powerful engine.
The prowess of the Mark 14 was such that after D-Day, it was used to shoot down V-1 flying bombs that began raining down on Britain in June 1944. One example also gained the first victory over a German jet fighter. The continuous development of the Spitfire over the war years meant that they could be used for other roles. Photographic reconnaissance was a vital task, which was undertaken later in the war by the Spitfire PR-19. This was a development of the 14, but without armament. It meant that the aircraft had the space and weight to carry extra fuel in the wings, vastly improving its range. For the pilot to take advantage of the ceiling of more than 40,000 feet, one of the first pressurized cockpits was introduced. There were, however, points in the war when the Spitfire began to show its limitations. This was mainly due to two factors. First, the Spitfire fighters always suffered from short range. By the middle of the war, when large streams of American bombers were suffering at the hands of the German fighters, an escort fighter was desperately needed to accompany them all the way to the target and back. The Spitfire was never able to fulfill this role. Instead, it went to the North American P-51 Mustang, a superb fighter, powered by a Packard-built Merlin engine, which had a range of 1,300 miles. Second, the Spitfire was never able to get to grips with ground attack. The stress poured onto the thin wing meant that some crashed, and many went back to the factory with damaged leading edges. The prime aircraft for this role was the Hawker Typhoon, which had a massive, thick wing and could easily withstand the buffeting at low level. However, the Supermarine team continued to produce new, improved marks of Spitfire until the last, the 24, appeared in 1948. Fighter pilots, though, have definite opinions on the value of these later variants. More than 20,000 Spitfires were produced in the 10 years from 1938. 22,000 men and women were employed by Supermarine and their subcontractors to build them. Thousands of pilots flew them, and many more maintained them. But the Spitfire was a wartime aircraft, and like many others, it could so easily be remembered by a few examples in museums. But it had gained a special place in aviation history, and no one was prepared to let it die.
If you compare the technical problems to a frontline fighter squadron, Tornado Squadron, where they have, largely speaking, everything that they need in terms of spares on the rack, it doesn't necessarily follow that we can do the same thing. Their operation is, largely speaking, they identify a fault, they change the black box, and it's solved. There are no black boxes in any of the aeroplanes which we have, and the spares are obviously rare, desirable, and can only be got on a sort of who you know, who you're prepared to exchange with basis, or can you manufacture them? Did the Air Force have the foresight to store them in the first place, and that sort of thing. And it is really, it's pure engineering rather than what frontlines largely become in terms of technical replacement. The long-term future, if I might go on to that, you can always repair airframes, that is, you know, the basic wings, fuselage, all the rest of it. You can indeed buy Spitfire main spars for the wings straight off the shelf, because there is, you know, a flourishing market in civil Spitfires. What will eventually ground it is when you can no longer refurbish the engines, because there are no acceptable replacements, and these have now gone in excess of 50 years, and you obviously can't go on forever. So that will probably be the final demise, but that is actually, we think, a fair way off in the future.
the popularity of the Spitfire in the present day and the enthusiasm for it wherever it performs and the books that have been written about it truly amaze me. Because probably even in 1950, if you'd said to me, was this going to happen? I'd have said no.
"60 years after the Spitfire entered service with the RAF, more than 50 examples are still in flying condition. Many more are under restoration. And they are still the most popular aircraft at air shows all over the world.
Like a boat. You look at it and you say, that boat can sail. You look at a Spitfire, you say, the Spitfire will fly. It's got to be a wonderful aircraft. And so I think even designers of the future can look at it and learn something from it. Because if a thing looks right, it normally